My crazy mother-in-law stole my vintage key collection, so I called the police and had her arrested. My wife threatened to leave me if I went through with pressing charges, so I filed for divorce myself, plus 3 updates. My mother-in-law is insanely entitled, and my wife's enabling of her has made our marriage very hard. Recently, she came to us wanting me to buy her a new phone because hers was 2 years old and out of date. She threw a fit when I refused, getting on the floor and pounding her fists against the hardwood. I still refused, so she got up and left, but not before yelling that she'll be getting the phone. Now, I have a collection of vintage skeleton keys that is worth a few $1,000s, and I kept them all in a locked display cabinet. Well, a few days ago I came home to find the cabinet forced open, and my entire collection gone. I checked the CCTV and saw my mother-in-law force the cabinet open with a crowbar. I called her right away and demanded she return my collection, but she told me she sold everything at a pawn shop already and used the money for a new phone. She said it was my fault because I wouldn't buy one for her. My wife was seemingly on my side when I told her, until I said I was going to the police. She begged me to drop it and even suggested I start a new collection. I refused to let it go because those keys are not only expensive, they're irreplaceable. I spent 10 years building that collection, but my wife kept blowing up and telling me to just let it go. Now to answer the questions before you ask, how did Miel get into the house? My wife unilaterally gave her a key when we moved in, that's why. Anyway, back to what happened that day. I eventually made up my mind and contacted the police. They came and took my statement a bit over an hour after I called the non-emergency line. I had video footage and the documentation of my collection ready. And then there were some texts I went out of my way to get from MIL to bait her into a confession. I wanted as much evidence as possible so she couldn't lie to the police. When I texted her demanding she get my collection back, she actually LOL'd and told me not a chance, and even boasted that she thought I was a pathetic son-in-law and my key collection was tacky anyway. I told her to at least tell me what pawn shop she sold the keys to so I could go buy them back and how much they paid her for them, and the dimwit admitted it all right away with glee in text. I had everything I needed for the police before they even showed up. The cops took the whole matter more seriously than I thought. I was worried they'd call it a civil matter since the thief was my mother-in-law and she had a key to the house, but they arrested MIL before long, and police went to the pawn shop before it closed to retrieve my collection. I got it all back from police after a couple of days, and for the moment, I've put the collection in a safe, secure place that no one can get to. The pawn shop pretty much gave up the entire key collection to police right away, like it was a bag of hot potatoes. Though I scrutinized every important key brought back, as far as I can tell, it's all there. That was a huge sigh of relief. I took time off work and barely slept for 2 days because of this ordeal. Also, the cabinet MEL broke into is pretty much a loss since she mangled the lock and doors prying it open. Thankfully, it wasn't an antique, and just something I got used for $50, so I'm just going to take it to the dump sooner or later. From her texts before, I found out MIL sold the whole collection to the pawn for a whopping total of $300. For a collection of hundreds of antique keys valued at $2 to $3 grand as a total, that low number felt like a punch in the gut to me. Likely the pawnbroker knew how valuable the collection could be as a whole. I mean, it's not like hitting a jackpot or anything, but money is still money, especially when a dumb little lady walks in with a box of goodies. Anyone else hear Mr. Krabs laughing? Anyway, the cost of repayment to the shop was supposed to be on MIL, but my wife paid them back out of our joint account instead. From what the shop owner said, MIL told them the key collection belonged to her deceased husband, and she was sick of the whole collection sitting in storage, so they believed her. But just to be clear, she's not a widow. Her husband divorced her and left the state around 15 years ago. MIL lives off Social Security and food stamps. She also holds garage sales every few months, and she often demanded our soda and beer cans so she could get the deposit money recycling them. MIL doesn't drive. She gets around on an electric scooter that tows a bicycle trailer. She lives in a long paid-off house, and she would not be having money troubles if she wasn't overspending every month. And she always counts on my wife to pick up the slack when she comes up short. My wife and I got in a huge fight when she got home because I had her mother arrested, but I told her I'm done with her enabling of her toxic mother. I said I was changing the locks as soon as possible and banning her mother from the house, and I also said that either we got marriage counseling or I'd be inquiring about my options for separation from an attorney. I thought my wife would beg me not to do that, but instead, she just called me horrible, packed a suitcase, and walked out to go to a motel. I just sat on the couch and let her go. She repeatedly looked like she was waiting for me to ask her to stay, but I didn't. In the morning, she texted me she'd be bailing her mother out and wanted me transfer her the money to pay for it since I was the one who got her mother mother arrested. When I said no, all I got back was a sarcastic, "Wow, Zrina." Not too long later, I had a gut feeling and checked the balance on the shared bank account, and my wife had taken out a lot of money. I wasn't sure if all that was needed for bail, so I called the pawn shop later. The owner confirmed my wife had come in and paid him back the $300 that he'd paid her mother for the keys. He was also quite angry and said he didn't want any of us in his shop ever again. I understood his anger, and weirdly enough had a fairly long talk with this guy, and he understood I'm not part of the crazy. I tried to call and text my wife for hours, but she didn't answer. That evening, I managed to find her. I knew which motel she'd likely go to, and I was right. It was both cheap and not far away. I found her car and then figured out which room she was in. She looked positively shocked to see me when she opened the door. I confronted her about the money she'd used from our shared account. She basically said that since I refused to pay her mother's bail after I was the one who had her arrested, she got the money from me another way. Then smugly stated she wasn't paying that money back into the shared account this time, and told me that's the karma I get, before shutting the door in my face. Then said through the door she'd call the cops on me if I didn't leave. The smug look she'd given me reminded me of nasty teenage girls when they get their way. It really ticked me off. I already knew my marriage was pretty much over, but that night it really sank in. I had a long sit down with some old video games and cola to think about my future. The house is rented, so I'm not renewing my half of the lease and will soon be apartment hunting. The last month of the lease is March, but I may leave sooner, depending on how soon I can find an apartment. We have no kids yet, thank God. So that's another thing I currently have in my favor. The next day, I changed the locks on the house and removed all of my money from the joint bank account and stopped all automated payments to and from it. I made sure to take only the amount of money I'd put into the account. There was still more than enough in it for me to break even and still leave the minimum required balance on the account. Either way, the cost of MIL's bail and paying back the pawn shop was now entirely out of my wife's pocket now, and I don't think she's noticed yet, but it shouldn't be long. I've been to a couple different divorce lawyers already, and I picked the second one since the first seemed like they were only there for a paycheck. I'll have the divorce papers served soon. I loved my wife, but it's clear she didn't love me, so I can't stay with her anymore. She can have her thieving hoarder mom all to herself now. We both have very comparable incomes, so I'll be pushing for a clean split divorce. This woman didn't deserve me, and I fell for her act. She didn't want a husband. She wanted an insurance plan. I will pursue any charges still possible against her mother. I'll update again when more happens, but I'll be clear on this. I won't be changing my mind. My soon-to-be ex-wife can beg and love bomb all she wants, if she even bothers to. I've never been her number one, and I'm not gonna settle for being number two in my own marriage. It is over. Update. It really didn't take me long to find and hire a divorce lawyer, and she's mean. Yes, my lawyer is a woman, and she seems pretty good at her job. She asked me a couple of times if I was really sure I wanted to do this, but once I explained my full story to her and showed some evidence, she agreed with me when I said I wanted to start ASAP, so she got the ball rolling. Oh, this divorce is going to cost me, but I don't care. I'll rebuild my savings later as a free man. I didn't even want to rent the house I'm currently living in anyway. Wifey pushed for that. I'd have been happy staying in our old apartment we used to share until we could have actually afforded to buy a house together instead, but that's obviously never happening. I'll be paying a lot less for an apartment once we separate. Before coming home, Wifey spent some time at a cheap motel when she bailed her mother out of jail, and she even threatened to call police on me when I went to see her there. I changed the locks with my landlord's permission while Wifey was still away, and sent her a text saying I'd done so, but I guess she'd not bothered to look since she never responded. So upon returning home, she ended up pounding on the door and screaming at me to let her in. I just watched her through the doorbell cam and let her keep it up for a while before she finally got on her phone to call me. I was already walking home from having had dinner with my best friend when she called, and I pointed out the text she'd not bothered to read. When I got home to let her in, she was puffy-cheeked, teary-eyed, and red with a bit of cat-butt face. I had a new key ready for her and told her if she gave a copy to her mother again, I'd be notifying our landlord, as they were already very angry she'd given her mother a key to begin with. Not sure what the landlord could have done, but it was enough to make Wifey comply for the moment. Plus, I'm not going to be living here much longer anyway. My mother-in-law still believes she did absolutely nothing wrong and is playing victim to Wifey every chance she gets. She's not allowed over anymore, for obvious reasons, and I've been repeatedly called a monster by her and Wifey. I've never been more glad that MIL has no friends, because then she'd be telling them all her convoluted version of the story to paint me as a villain. I just know it. She was told how much my key collection is roughly worth and what kind of felony charges she could be facing, though my collection was returned fully intact, so she may get get the charges lessened. I'd like to hope she gets a decent punishment at least, but I'm not really counting on the system to throw the book at a manipulator like her. As I said in my previous post, wifey also paid her mother's bail and what she owed to the pawn shop with money out of our joint bank account, and then smugly told me that she wouldn't be putting the money back. Basically, that was a terrible power move, and her only way to try and put all the cost on me. I've since removed everything I had in that account and stopped all future payments to it so she can't spend my money too, and I've changed my passwords to pretty much everything. Wifey flipped the hell out on me for it once she finally checked the account a couple days ago, because that meant that what she paid for Mill's bail and reimbursing the pawn shop was all in her money only, and now there was no more access to my funds to supplement her own with. I just ignored her tantrum and went into the home office to watch anime on my computer. She banged on the door for a while, demanding I talk to her. I just stayed quiet and put on headphones. Wifey has repeatedly demanded I drop all charges against her mother, and even said that if I really loved her, I would not only stop all this, I'd cover the cost too. When I kept refusing, she moved into the spare bedroom. She tried to kick me out of the master bedroom first, but I made it clear I'm not giving up the master bedroom when she's the one at fault. She tried to start taking my stuff out, but I just blocked her while pointing my finger at her face and said, "No," like I was talking to a dog. She ended up crying and saying I was demeaning her, but I didn't care. Then for some more deception on her part, she admitted to me out of pure spite that until this mess had started, she'd been planning on letting her mother come live with us full-time soon because of the state of her hoarder house. She boasted that she was just gonna move her in while I was at work. I told her we were supposed to be equal partners before this all happened, and I was sick of her unilateral decision-making, and as long as I'm paying 50% of the lease, her mother will not be living here, and if she tried, I'd throw all her mother's stuff out immediately. Wifey looked like she wanted to explode and stormed off to have a drink and a loud phone call with her mother in the kitchen. I just started removing her stuff from the master bedroom and left it in the other room for her. I've put a new lock on the door to the master bedroom too. I had wifey served at her job, which she said really embarrassed her in front of her colleagues, and she flipped out on me again once she got home. Apparently she didn't take my threats of divorce seriously until those papers were actually in her hands. She said I couldn't do this, but I told her I was done. She made it more than clear where she stands. I told her I learned a rather interesting phrase online: when people show you who they really are, believe them, and she's clearly shown me who she really is, and it's not the woman I fell in love with. That woman disappeared and got replaced with an entitled mommy's girl who refuses to act her age right after we got married, which makes it pretty obvious she did that intentionally. At this point, I don't think she ever loved me, just my wallet. I can't stay married to a woman who conned me into marrying her. Then she started screaming at me that she wasn't a gold digger, so I asked her if she'd have been inclined to stay married to me if I'd done the all same things to her. She tried to deny it at first, then looked around like she was trying to find a better answer. Then she just gaslit to deflect as usual, but I had none of it. I told her right then and there that I'm not renewing the lease on the house with her because I don't want to live with a petulant woman child I can't trust, and if she wants to keep the house, she can go ahead and start a new lease to move her mother in once I'm gone. Finally, that's when the real waterworks started. She said I was destroying our family, and I said, "What family?" and pointed out how we don't have kids, and her mother is more important to her than me. We have family. Then I just walked away. She loudly cried in the living room for hours, but I ignored her. Now she's giving me the hardcore silent treatment and won't look me in the eyes. I'm actually enjoying it, which just seems to make her angrier. As an added bonus, I warned my current landlord about wifey wanting to move her mother in. I gave him all the details I had about MIL, the state of her hoarder house, and how much of a deceptive mommy's girl wifey is, and warned him that if he let my mother-in-law live in any property he owns, she would turn it into an utter disaster. He thanked me for telling him, and is now not going to let wifey renew the lease on her own if she tries. He'll be advertising the property soon. Wifey has no idea yet, and likely would have only just barely been able to afford the house with her mother's help anyway. One more thing. Yesterday, someone warned me to take my name off the joint bank account entirely, so I would not be on the hook for any overdraft. I took that to heart and went to the bank to get it done. Only took a few minutes to do it, and the bank is 10 minutes away by car. All good now. I've been working from home lately, so I had the time. All statements from the account were already printed and given to my lawyer too, so I can wash my hands of it. Update 2. After roughly a week of the silent treatment from her, wifey couldn't keep it up anymore and started love bombing. She even tried to make me dinner and get me drunk. I told her while she was cooking that I wouldn't touch anything she made. For one, she's a terrible cook. And secondly, I don't trust her not to put something in the food. She made overcooked hamburgers, and I didn't touch them or the alcohol provided. I mean, the beer was already opened. She cried night and said I was being mean by not eating her food, and I coldly said it was because I can't trust her anymore. She retorted that it wasn't like she'd cheated on me or anything. I said back that she may as well have cheated since her mother was always more important to her than me, the man she married. You can't keep a marriage by treating your spouse as secondary. Wifey changed the subject by breaking down crying again and begged that if I stopped the divorce, we could get the marriage counseling I'd wanted, and she'd never try to have her mother live with us. I told her it was far too late. She had her chance and blew it badly. She already made it very clear where she'll always stand. In the past 2 years, she made no effort to get better and only acted nicer in public. Why would I want to stay in that sort of toxic relationship? She had to answer truthfully for once and admitted that she likely would have left me if I'd done the same stuff to her. But she still kept trying to convince me not to divorce and that we could work it out. I had to just walk away and go into the office again. Wifey didn't stop and even tried to initiate intimacy multiple times. She walked around the house in lingerie a lot, and even my favorite of wearing nothing but a lacy apron. She hasn't done that for me since our honeymoon, even when I asked. She tried touching me in places, running her fingers in my hair, and getting on her knees to try to entice me. I didn't take her bait and stonewalled. She ended up gaslighting me with the "Am I not good enough?" line. I told her she used to be, but I just can't see her that way anymore. Wifey left me alone to hit the bottle hard after I said that, and she wound up puking in the kitchen. I wouldn't put it past her to try and baby trap or frame me at this point. I even lock the door when I sleep, and I've installed a hidden camera in the room. I want out of this house, but I can't leave yet until I can get into my new place. Wifey later doubled down while sobbing when nothing was working on me and begged again that I don't go through with the separation and divorce. But I've already found an apartment that'll be vacant sometime in early to mid-March. I've also notified all of the utilities of the change as well. Wifey's now freaking out even more because now she has to find an apartment for herself right away. I don't really care where she'll end up. I'm just happy I'll be free of this house soon. I've also made sure not to tell her where my upcoming apartment is located, and she's tried to get that info out of me 3 times already. As soon as my new apartment is ready, I'll start moving stuff in. I'll be taking the bed from the guest room when I go. I paid for it after all. And it'll be easier to move since it's a queen size, and what's in the master bedroom is a king. I'm a light sleeper, so having a comfortable bed is a must. My wife can have the bulk of the furniture. She can either leave it for the next tenant or she can sell it. I don't care anymore. The apartment I'll be moving into is a 1-bedroom. The previous tenant left it in a sorry state, so it needs some remodeling. But I picked that specific one because not only will the rent be far cheaper than the house, I'll be much closer to my job. Like, I could walk or bike to work from there. And I just might. I haven't ridden a bike in years because I never could get wifey to. Yet another thing she's held me back from. So when I move out, one of the first things I'm gonna do is buy a bike. Update 3. A few months ago, I anonymously reported my MIL as a serious hoarder. Someone here commented I should report my MIL's hoarding to the fire marshal, and at the time I decided to do it because I was angry and wanted to get back at her for stealing my collection from me and making my life hell. Mill had been building a hoard in her house since my wife was a teenager. The house was filled nearly to the brim with rotten garbage and was rodent infested. I've actually seen rats there. I made a call to the city from a number I googled. At first I thought nothing came of it as weeks went by, but I guess someone looked into it because MIL's house was given an inspection. The house was found to be in even worse shape than I thought. It was not only a serious fire hazard to itself and everything around it, and rodent infested. There were also some exposed electrical wires, a roof leak that's gone unfixed for years that caused bad rot damage and black mold. The outside of the house didn't look that bad, and it was in a neighborhood full of old houses that looked similar, which is likely why no one reported it till I did. My setbacks W figured out it was me who reported her mother, what with the timing and all. She came home and ranted to me about all the things her mother told her the inspector found, and how her mother was likely to lose her house now, but it was only a matter of time before something like that happened. If I didn't report her mother, someone else eventually would have. Sitbeck screamed at me that I was a horrible, deceitful person. I asked her if she wanted to be the pot or the kettle, then reminded her of all the reasons why we were separating. I ended up losing my cool and ranted at her, saying that her enabling of her mother caused this. Her acting like her mother stealing my irreplaceable skeleton key collection I've spent a decade building wasn't important, caused this. And her selfish, unilateral decision-making and bratty behavior ever since we got married caused this. Couples are supposed to make decisions together. Instead, she just kept making them for us both, without even asking my input. So I made a unilateral decision of my own for once, and reported her mother's hoarding, which needed to be reported anyway, because it's a danger to her and the people around her. I told Stebex W I was long sick of just sucking covering it all up all the time and just letting things pass while they acted like I was the bad guy and walked all over me. Her mother would get nothing more from me, and maybe she wouldn't be as crazy once she's no longer living in a house filled with fumes of rotten garbage, rodent excrement, and black freaking mold. Sitbex W just walked away, sniffling and cursing me. Yeah, I know I went too far. I'd been reduced to being just as petty as her. I made that call because I was angry, but I had no choice but to stand by that decision after I'd done it. Mill ended up demanding my Sitbex W foot the cost of cleaning and restoring the house, but she couldn't afford it. From what I heard, Mel went off on her with her demands and told her to get the money any way she could, even demanding I pay for it since I was the one who reported the house. She even said to sue me, but Sitbex W told her it wouldn't work. The house was in exceedingly poor shape: rotten garbage, exposed wires, roof leaks, rot, and black mold. No one should be living in that. When Sitbex W tried to tell her mother she couldn't afford pay for the house to be cleaned and renovated, her mother actually attacked her like a wild animal. She hit and scratched her multiple times and tried to pull her hair out. That's when it happened. Mil had a heart attack on the spot. Going ape on her daughter must have triggered it. Sitbex called 911 while looking for aspirin in the house, but by the time help had arrived, her mother had expired. Sitbex W came home with a police officer in tow for some reason and was absolutely mad, screaming at me about what just happened to her mother. She said this was all my fault, and in all of her ranting, I found out her mother had a weak heart. It's the real reason why she was on disability. The officer had to separate Sitbex W from me, and she fell onto the couch sobbing. I hated Mil with a passion, but I wasn't trying to end her life. I still feel great guilt over this. From what the police officer said, and from what my Sitbex W said, I pieced the story together and later typed it out, but just couldn't bring myself to post it. I was still racked with guilt. That evening, when I found out my mother-in-law had passed away, Sitbex W managed to calm down long enough to speak to the police officer more clearly about what happened, but she also kept shifting between blaming herself and blaming me. I asked her from across the room why I was never told about her mother's heart condition, and she yelled it was none of my damn business. But it explains why Mill used to dramatically put her hand on her chest and cry so many times when she wasn't getting her way. My Sitbex W ended up going crazy in the bathroom she'd been using since we started sleeping separately. She asked the police officer for a moment to herself, then just went crazy after shutting the door. She came out a few minutes later looking angry, but calm, then told me I was cleaning that mess up. She packed her bags again and left the house for the motel once more and told me she wouldn't be coming back unless it was to get her stuff. I was so guilt-ridden that I was hardly able to function for days back then and had to take leave from work because of stress migraines. I basically spent 3 days on the couch, hopped up on meds, but after that, I got my ass in gear again. My friends all tell me it wasn't not my fault. I didn't know, and Mil was crazy. Either way, what's done is done, and I have to live with it.